Right, State Capture Inquiry Chairperson Justice Raymond Zondo has dismissed former Correctional Services Commissioner Arthur Fraser's application for leave to cross-examine witnesses. Mo Sheikh and Gibson Genji are among those he wanted to quiz after they implicated him in corruption during his tenure as State Security Agency head. Zondo says allowing such a move wouldn't be at the benefit of the Commission.
I can see no reason why it can be said that it is in the interest of the work of the Commission to grant the applicant leave to cross-examine any of these witnesses in the circumstances that I have set out in relation to non-compliance with the rules of the Commission and in relation to there being no explanation as to why, having said that his statement would not be complete without the documents that he asked for from the State Security Agency, and the Commission having given him time to ensure that he secured such documents, and the State Security Agents having undertaken to give him such documents, why he has not pursued that and why he is no longer seeking to place those before the Commission so that his statement before the Commission is complete. In all of these circumstances, I've concluded that the applicant's application stands to be dismissed, and it is so dismissed.
So on the further claims, Fraser failed to explain which parts of the evidence he would like to cross-examine the witnesses on.
It is quite clear that they agreed as to what should happen, and that included compliance with Chapter 24 of the regulations promulgated under the Intelligence Services Act of 2002. The State Security Agency says he has not complied with that. In order to get the documents that he contends he is entitled to get, he has not explained why he has not done so in circumstances where he told this Commission on affidavit that those documents that he sought were very important in order for him to complete his statement and to give this Commission a complete picture.
Right, let's unpack the broader implications of this ruling. I'm joined now by Lawson Naidoo, the Executive Secretary of the Council for Advancement of the South African Constitution, as well as political analyst Ebrahim Faki. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Naturally, when you look at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture in the country, it will evoke all sorts of reactions and emotion. And in our country in particular, there is alignment on specific, I suppose, ideological beliefs. If you are, say, RET forces, you believe this is a new dawn commission of inquiry and therefore will be targeting those people. If you're on the other end, you think, well, this is a tool that is fighting corruption. An outcome like this one of today, how does it play out in those particular spaces? Ebrahim?
Well, I think it makes it sort of difficult for the side which wants to scupper the findings of the Commission, and it kind of says that the rules of the Commission are going to apply it fairly consistently and are not going to apply, sort of allow capricious interventions which want to stymie the work and delay it further. In the one sense, that's the case. In the second, of course, it robs the Deputy Chief Justice of the opportunity to ask for a further extension. That's just a naughty take on it. But clearly, it doesn't mean that this ruling is now suddenly making everything crystal clear and that the fight against corruption proceeds apace, because we know that the sinews of the reach is so deep and is so entrenched that it's difficult to unravel it. But this is a bit by bit kind of thing that's going. And the one thing that was made clear today is that in terms of the rules, capricious and interventions which seek to stymie and delay are not going to find traction.
Yeah.
And that's a positive thing, but it's a very slow, it's a very process-driven and bitty type of process.
Lawson, does the Commission of Inquiry run a risk of committing a serious mistake of leaving out, I suppose, the testimonies of some of the critical players that should be giving us their versions here? And will that in any way weaken the outcome of this report?
Well, Tobo, I think, the terms of reference of the Commission of Inquiry are so broad, as the Deputy Chief Justice himself has reflected on several occasions, that it would be almost impossible to execute the mandate in terms of all of those terms of reference. So he has to end up having to prioritize certain issues, and that prioritization could have been done much more efficiently, I believe. But be that as it may, he's now...
All right, we seem to have lost Lawson. Lawson, please unmute there. I think your device there muted itself mid-sentence. If you can just unmute again, hopefully we can hear. Yeah, there you are.
Okay. No, I was saying that, this is the terms of reference are extremely broad, and there's nothing to stop the Deputy Chief Justice in his report to say that there are various aspects of his inquiry and investigation that he has been unable to conclude, and to recommend that that be referred to other agencies for follow-up and further investigation. So, I don't think that we should expect that the State Capture Commission is going to be able to deal with everything that falls under its terms of reference. That would be an extremely tall order and an unrealistic one. But what we do hope is that on the issues on which the Commission has focused, particularly in regards to state-owned entities, the role of the former President Zuma, the Guptas and so on, that there will be decisive findings and recommendations for further action to ensure accountability.
Yeah. And how do we then ensure that there is no room for the anti-state capture inquiry forces from casting doubt on this process? So ensure that the Commission itself is able to uphold its line of march and to say, these are our rules, this is how we function, and if you do not fall within those rules, well, the horse has bolted. That's it, you've missed the train. And have credibility with those who are going to be reading this report.
See, I think the integrity and the credibility is underpinned by the rules, right, and the terms of reference. But a pall of doubt over the Commission is already there, whether you like it or not, and they have nothing to do with the rules and the processes and procedures of the Commission. That is a political question that people are going to raise irrespective of whether there is a faithful following and interpretation of the terms of reference or not. So that political question is going to arise. In any event, I mean, there is a pall of doubt over not just the credibility, but the findings of the Commission, because already there's been some evidence which has been led, despite the fact that conclusions have not yet been drawn and the final report is not available. There is sufficient information and evidence in the basis on which certain institutions and organizations in the law enforcement and criminal justice cluster can act and have not acted. So those come about not because of the rules of procedure, not because of the terms of reference, not because of the interpretation of those. That pall of doubt has been there regardless, partly because of the functioning of the Commission and partly because of the inability of other institutions of state to have carried on, particularly in the criminal justice cluster and other services, to proceed in the way in which they should have on the basis of information and evidence which has already been led at the Commission.
Yeah. Lawson?
No, I would agree with Ebrahim on that. I mean, I think, a lot of evidence has been adduced by the Commission. Much of that has been shared with the law enforcement agencies. So, that is an aspect that, we need to focus on, not just after the Commission's report is published, but already now. But I also think that, there's this popular misconception that the Commission is going to rule on the guilt or otherwise of certain people who have appeared before the Commission. That is not the role of a Commission of Inquiry. It's not to find anyone guilty. It's to evaluate the evidence before it and to recommend what action should be taken in regard to that evidence that the Deputy Chief Justice has heard. And the formal criminal justice processes will have to continue. So the agencies such as the Hawks and the NPA will have to play their role in producing dockets where evidence is available and to prosecute those cases before our courts. Ultimately, it is the courts of South Africa that will rule on those issues. And the role that this Commission of Inquiry has played is to bring all of that information into the public spotlight, to have that evidence evaluated with a view to prosecutions. That is going to be the ultimate goal. And ultimately, that's what we want to see, because that's where accountability lies. Not in the report of a Commission of Inquiry, but in what action is taken on the basis of that report.
Yeah. Ebrahim, let's look at the state capture phenomenon itself. At the height of this so-called state capture project, you would find that there was an orchestrated formal or informal web of networks trying to siphon billions out of the state and try to keep other people out of jail and so on and so forth, and state security being one of those targeted institutions. Could you say today with some degree of confidence that that particular project has been disrupted?
No, I'm afraid not. The reality is that the headline issues have been stymied. The things like Bell Pottinger, the kind of rhetoric which they unleashed on social media and elsewhere, some of the bigger networks, some of the bigger personalities in the chain, some of the people who were misusing their authority or abusing their executive authority, and those people who were manipulating institutions openly have been dealt with. But that is a very limited and a very small coterie of what has in fact happened. As I said, the sinews of this go so deep into the state. I mean, would you have believed that in the process of the commission, while it was ongoing, that an issue like the digital vibe scandal would have arisen, or that a whole range of municipalities would have been found to have behaved in pernicious and egregious ways, where you would find AG reports, you would find State Department reports, you would find the insurrectionary impulse in July and June of this year. If we can with any degree of confidence say that this has been disrupted, those issues would not have arisen. So I'm afraid I have to be in accord with Lawson here. The report is not going to be the bellwether, nor is it going to be the test of whether this is disrupted. The only point at which we can reach that conclusion is if there's a cleanup in the state-owned enterprises, firstly. Secondly, if there's actual prosecutions and there's actual action, even if there isn't always a successful prosecution, but there is action on behalf of the Hawks, on behalf of the NPA, on behalf of other elements in the criminal justice cluster. Until such time that there is action and there is process and proceedings, we can't, with any degree of confidence, make any claim about this.
Let's take a break. We'll continue and wrap up the conversation with Lawson Naidoo as well as Ebrahim Faki in a moment here on In Focus. Stay with us. We're in conversation tonight with CASAC Executive Secretary Lawson Naidoo as well as political analyst Ebrahim Faki. And of course, the question we try to tackle is the anti-state capture inquiry agenda still at play? But more broadly, has the processes, the various players who have come together to try and disrupt this, you talk business who are for democracy, you talk the various institutions that are trying to act on corruption, have they done enough to be able to disrupt these networks? Lawson, the big debate, particularly around the Commission of Inquiry, is other non-state structures, the major multinationals that played a role here, and how none of them have been pursued with as much vigor as those who are, of course, playing this thing out in the realms of the African National Congress.
Well, I don't think that's entirely true, because as I think Ebrahim very eloquently explained just now, very few people have been vigorously pursued as a result of what has come out of the Commission of Inquiry. To the extent that there has been action against private sector players, we've at least seen some of them having to pay back some of the illicit earnings that they have, the likes of KPMG and others, that have actually paid back some of the money that was earned unlawfully. But much more needs to be done in that space, and there needs to be an equal focus on those private sector players that facilitated and ensured that the state capture project was the success that it was. So, the action needs to continue against those. And it comes back again to those key law enforcement agencies, the Hawks and the NPA, to take the appropriate action. I think the issue of the Anti-State Capture Commission narrative is one that will continue. It's been there for a very long time. We've seen witnesses come before the Commission of Inquiry and use it as a platform for factional politics within the ruling party. We're likely to see, once the report is made available and is made public, that there are likely to be legal challenges to the content of the report. All of those are part of the strategy to seek to undermine the credibility of the process and of the report itself. But we know that the report will contain merely a set of recommendations that other agencies will have to pursue as part of their own mandates and take the appropriate action. So whilst there may be legal challenges, I don't think those legal challenges will necessarily stop those agencies from doing what is required.
Yeah. Ebrahim, when of course this whole thing came to the fore, we saw a coming together of various broad fronts, from business to law institutions, those who were pro-democracy, those who were pro-constitutionality. Where are the conveners of those movements? Are they still having their foot on the pedal, or have they kind of gone on to mind their own business and continue with their profitable activities?
No, I think we need to separate that, Thabo. And before we get into that separation, there's something that Lawson has alerted us to, and that's fundamental and absolutely vital. That is, the gaze needs to stop being on the anti-state commission players, and the gaze needs to be on those institutions which now need to carry forward the work, firstly, and secondly, the gaze needs to be on those people who try to scupper the process from within. So those people who appear before the commission and who are obstructionist, or who used it to remain silent and then made a mockery of the commission, or who made, as Lawson says, statements which were entirely factional and had nothing to do with actually leading evidence before the commission, right? Now, they're going to try a whole range of other obfuscatory strategies and obstructionist strategies, including legal challenges. So our gaze needs to shift now to the courts and the criminal justice cluster and the law enforcement institutions overall. That includes the police, the Hawks, the NPA, the prosecuting authority, and so on. When you separate them from the private sector, there has to be a vigorous pursuing of those people in the private sector who were complicit in this, those who abused their authority, who exercised their authority outside of the bounds that the public service rules and other things allow for, those who manipulated institutions. But at the same time, we also have to be careful of the fact that our problem is not just about state capture. It is also about sloth. It is also about laziness. It is also about maladministration. It is also about the lack of political will. So that's where we've got to keep focus on, to ensure that those recommendations that emerge out of this are actually implemented, but more importantly, all kinds of new policies which are adopted, including a move to renewables, including anti-austerity measures, including changes in economic policy, those have actually followed through.
Yeah. While you're there, that's a very interesting point that you raised. SACP raises a point of when we put, for example, anti-austerity equals anti-state capture, we are making a mistake. So where is the point of alignment? Where do we begin to align now going forward? Because there are those who are saying, well, the austerity measures which are largely pushed by Treasury as a way to fight corruption are actually not the way that we should be going. And therefore, when we go there, we kick the bucket, the water with the baby, to say even the state capture thing is just a farce. It's a mess to take power back to white monopoly capital.
Well, I think, Thabo, the issue here is the state capture project is a large part of why we're in the fiscal crisis that we're in at the moment. So to shift the argument in that way, it makes no sense whatsoever. Had we not had state capture, we would not have the fiscal constraints that we currently face. We would not have the austerity measures that are being implemented by Treasury, because we simply don't have the money. So, it's a false accusation that is being leveled. And that's why I again say that the Commission is being used for the purposes of factional politics. And let's rather deal with the issues that fall under the terms of reference of the Commission. And the other important point, I think, to note in terms of the recommendations that are likely to come out of the Commission is one part of it will deal with the individuals that were involved and the entities that were involved in state capture. But an equally important part of this report is going to be what it says about the state of public institutions, organs of state, and how those can be strengthened and capacitated to avert this from happening again. And that will include institutions such as Parliament, which was proven to be totally ineffective in holding state capture at bay. It will include, the range of state-owned companies that the Commission has investigated. And I think those remedial measures may, in the long term, be of greater benefit to South Africa's democracy.
Yeah. Ebrahim, I mean, the alignment of forces seems to be disturbed by that particular issue, policy direction. Those who were initially aligned with the anti-state capture project say, well, if now we are taking this austerity direction, we will not be joining forces with you.
Well, no, you see, the reality is we need to disaggregate what this austerity means and what those of us who are talking about anti-austerity measures actually mean. We don't mean that we must follow the rhetoric which says that the Commission is siding with white monopoly capital as an instrument of theirs, and therefore we must be anti-it because we are anti-austerity. No. We are anti-austerity in the areas where there is a need for austerity. There is not a need for austerity across the board, but there's certainly a need for austerity in wasteful expenditure. There's definitely a need for austerity when it comes to superfluous expenditure on a range of things government does not, in fact, have to do. Then you've got to bring in, as Lawson has alerted us to again, the question of Parliament. Where was its oversight function when it comes to budgets, when it comes to expenditure, when it comes to looking at the annual plans and the expenditure patterns in the budget oversight processes of those institutions that it's meant to oversee? And because of its lax oversight capability, this thing has been allowed to run rampant. That's where you need the austerity to come in, when Parliament's oversight kicks in and stops the kind of wasteful expenditure, superfluous expenditure on a range of things which are unnecessary. For example, let me give you one simple headline example which will resonate with everyone. How is it that for public safety and policing, there are massive cuts in the budget, yet there are major increases for VIP protection? That kind of thing does not, in fact, sit well. Now, there, Parliament has to exercise its oversight capability and say, who's profiting from this, where and in which way? The same thing is true for a whole range of tenders and contracts that are handed out by the state. That who is lurking there and manipulating processes to the benefit of one or other player in the process. So this question of state capture, of irregular influence, is something we have to keep a watch on, and one of the prime institutions to do that, other than the criminal justice cluster, is in fact Parliament.
Right. The question that Ebrahim raises there, Lawson, the electoral outcomes of the local government elections and I suppose the now lesser key positions held by the members of the African National Congress, does that help the state in any way? Because I suppose these are the key positions that would have directed where resources go, whether you're looking at the fight back or whether you're looking at those who are saying we are pro-democracy.
Well, I think that's a question that's yet to be answered. And, on past experience of the coalition arrangements that we've seen at play at a local government level, it hasn't led to more effective or more stable governance. In fact, it has enhanced and increased the levels of instability at a local government level. And until we are able to come to terms with the new political environment that we're finding ourselves in, where the dominant party that we've had for the last 27 years no longer occupies that dominant position, we have to prepare and prepare our institutional responses as to how the new political environment is going to play out, how that's going to implement the key provisions of the Constitution in terms of ensuring effective public service as well as accountability. And those are issues that I think, is still going to have to grapple with. And, in the midst of all of that, we have to look at an amendment of the electoral regime at a national and local government, at a national and provincial level ahead of the next elections in 2024.
Yeah. Quick one, we're in there, Ebrahim Faki, as we wrap up.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's where the gaze now shifts to, firstly, electoral reform. But let's not also lose sight of the fact that if you talk about a reconfigured electoral environment locally, if you look at 2016, the major metros, which have a big portion of GDP spend, actually had a range of opaque things which were not transparent. In theory, you would think because there's different configurations, because of a minority of parties gang together and made up an artificial majority, they were able to hold what is the national governing party to better account. No. In fact, what we had was the contrary. We had these bit players trying to have their own portion of the pie. So what you have is a major crisis of politics generally. And that politics generally is that these people are insular, they are inward looking, and they are in for their own minor incremental advantage. And until that maturity starts to seep in amongst the political class, you're going to have more of this opaque deal making perpetuated ad nauseum.
Gentlemen, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Lawson Naidoo as well as Ebrahim Faki.